Mom murmured. We didn't know better then. And I wondered why not knowing always ended up on my skin. Her fingers were wrapped around her mug like it might float away if she loosened her grip. The kitchen light was too bright, catching the faint silver lines on the back of her hand, the same kind that run across my thighs and shoulders. She stared at the steam curling up from her tea like the answer might be written there instead of in the raised welt of memory under my shirt. My own hands were flat on the table, palms pressed against the laminate to keep them from shaking. Between us sat a plate of untouched biscuits and a thick manila folder from my therapist that I'd been stupid enough to bring, as if documentation would turn my parents into people who read. It was a Sunday afternoon in late winter when I finally realized the conversations I kept having with my mother all followed the same script. I said, "This hurt me." And she said, "We did our best." And somehow the blame circled back like a boomerang and cracked me in the head. I'm 31. I moved out 9 years ago. I have a job, friends who hug me without flinching, and a cat who thinks my lap is the only stable landmass on the planet. And yet, sitting at my parents' kitchen table, I could feel myself shrinking back into the kid who counted bathroom tiles to survive being taught a lesson. The folder between us wasn't just paper. It was 2 years of therapy and one very careful letter from my psychologist, written at my request, summarizing the impact of corporal punishment and emotional invalidation on my nervous system. My therapist had said, "If you want to talk to them, it might help to have something neutral, something that doesn't sound like an accusation." I nodded like that made sense. I'm realizing now there's no such thing as neutral when someone's whole identity is wrapped around being a good parent. Mom blew on her tea, not looking at me. "You make it sound so calculated," she said. "Like we enjoyed it. Like we sat there planning how to hurt you." I felt my fingernails dig into the laminate. "I didn't say you enjoyed it," I said, keeping my voice as even as I could. "I said it hurt. That's a fact, not a motive." She flinched at the word. "Fact. Like it had teeth." Her gaze flicked to the folder, then away. "In our day, it was normal," she said. "Everyone got smacked. Teachers hit kids at school. No one called it trauma. And yet here we are," I said quietly. "Me in therapy twice a week because my body thinks a raised voice means I'm about to get hit. Maybe normal wasn't actually okay." She pulled her cardigan tighter around her. "We didn't know better then," she repeated, softer this time, as if saying it quietly made it more true. I looked at the faint white line on my left forearm, barely visible now unless you knew where to look. A belt buckle, one of the times Dad misjudged. I thought about the way my shoulders still tense when someone moves too fast in my peripheral vision. About the way I can't stand the sound of leather sliding through belt loops. "I know you didn't know better," I said, and my voice cracked on the word no. "My point is, I'm the one living with what you didn't know." She stared at me like I just told her the sky was being dramatic. I keep thinking there must have been a single moment it all started, some neat origin story for why my childhood feels like it belongs to someone who grew up in a different century. There isn't. It was more like rust, slow, creeping, invisible until one day the metal gives way. But if I had to pick a beginning, I'd choose the first time I remember seeing my own blood on the kitchen floor and my father calling it your fault. I was maybe 6. Old enough to remember, too young to be believed. We were running late for church, which in our house was pretty much a mortal sin by itself. Dad had lost his keys again, Mom couldn't find the iron dresses she swore she'd hung up, and my little brother had decided this was the morning he would stage a protest about wearing anything with buttons. The house felt like it always did on Sundays. Too warm, too loud, smelling like cheap aftershave and hairspray and toast that had gone one click too far. I'd been told to make myself useful, while they sorted themselves out, which for some reason that day meant set the table for after. I climbed up onto the counter to reach the good plates, the ones that lived on the top shelf because God forbid we act like we deserved nice things on a Tuesday. My socks slipped on the edge of a dish towel. I grabbed the cupboard door, missed, and went down hard. The plate I'd been reaching for came down with me, hitting the counter first, then exploding on the floor. A shard caught my forearm. I remember being surprised more than anything, watching a thin red line bloom and then drip, bright and shocking against the beige linoleum. For maybe 3 seconds the world was silent. Then Dad's voice cracked through it like thunder. "What the hell was that?" I froze. Mom appeared in the doorway first, eyes flicking from the broken plate to my arm, then to my face. She looked annoyed, not worried. "Oh, for God's sake, my name," she said. "Why can't you be careful?" Blood was starting to trickle down towards my wrist, warm and sticky. I opened my mouth to say, "I'm sorry," but Dad was already there, the smell of his aftershave hitting me before his shadow did. "What did we say about climbing on the counters?" he barked. My mouth moved but nothing came out. I honestly couldn't remember if they'd actually said anything about that, or if they just expected me to know via osmosis. Dad's face went red. "Look what you did," he said, gesturing at the floor. "You break everything you touch. You never listen. Always in your own world. Now we're late, your mother has to clean this, and you've injured yourself like an idiot." I tried again, but my throat closed. He grabbed my uninjured arm, fingers digging in just enough to hurt, and hauled me upright. My cut stung as the skin stretched. "You want to bleed?" he said, as if I'd chosen this. "You want us to spend our Sunday in the emergency room because you can't follow simple instructions?" Mom stepped in then, finally, pressing a wad of paper towel to the cut. "Hold still," she snapped. "Stop crying, it's not that bad. You're making it worse." I hadn't realized I was crying until she said it. She cleaned the cut, slapped a bandage on it, and handed me a roll of paper towels and the broom. "Clean up the mess," she said, already turning away. I remember the texture of the paper towel more clearly than the pain. The way the blood soaked through in irregular shapes, the way the little bits of glass caught the light as I swept them into a dustpan. I remember Dad muttering, "Every damn time," under his breath, as he walked away. What I don't remember is anyone saying, "Are you okay?" That's the part my therapist keeps coming back to. Not just the incident, the blood, the yelling, but the complete absence of comfort after. The story written in that silence: "You caused this. You fix it. Your pain is an inconvenience." You let that story run long enough, and "we didn't know better" stops sounding like an explanation and starts sounding like an excuse. There were more obvious things later. The belt. The wooden spoon. Dad's fingers around my upper arm, squeezing until bruises bloomed the next day. The time he yanked me by the hair because I talked back, when he called my brother a sissy for crying. "We never hit you that hard," Mom says now, when she's in one of her revisionist moods. "It was just a smack. Just enough to correct you." I counted the number of holes in the bathroom vent while I waited for the sting to fade, pressing my forearms against the cold edge of the sink to make the fire in my skin go somewhere else. I learned to breathe so quietly you'd think I wasn't there. I learned to take up less space, make less noise, have fewer needs. There were emotional cuts, too. Finer, harder to see. My panic attacks in high school got called drama. My straight A report card was a good start, but why isn't this one an A+? The day I got into my first choice of university, Dad said, "We'll see if you can actually handle it," instead of "Congratulations." When I came home from my first year in the city, thinner and jumpier and so tired I could barely stand, Mom hugged me and then held me at arm's length, frowning. "You look awful," she said. "Are you on drugs?" "No," I said, taken aback. "I'm just stressed. Exams. Everyone's stressed," she said. "You've always been dramatic. Toughen up." I did. For a while. I graduated. Got a job. Moved into a share house with walls so thin you could hear your roommate's alarm through your own pillow. I started going to therapy because my friend group thought it was normal, The way my parents thought smacking kids was normal. At first, I went for stress. Within 3 sessions, I was talking about the plate, the belt, the silence. My therapist, Maya, the same one who wrote the letter, never flinched. That sounds terrifying as a child, she said, the first time I ran through my greatest hits. I'm so sorry you went through that. No one had ever said that to me before. I'm sorry you went through that. Not, you turned out fine, not, we had it worse, not, that's just how it was. Just sorry. Full stop. If you've never had your suffering met with empathy, you don't realize how weirdly radical that is. It was like someone opening a window in a room I'd forgotten to resent. Over the next year, she gently, annoyingly, persistently challenged the story that had been stamped into my skin. Why is your first instinct to defend them? She'd ask whenever I'd say, they hit us, but not that much. Or, yeah, they screamed, but they paid for school. I don't want to be unfair. I'd say, and do you think they're being fair to you when they downplay what happened? That's how we ended up with the letter. I'd floated the idea of talking to my parents about the past, half hoping Maya would say, absolutely not, that's a terrible idea. Instead, she said, it could be healing for you, regardless of how they respond, as long as we prepare. Would it help if I wrote something summarizing how these experiences have impacted you? I imagined sliding a neat, objective document across the table, my parents reading it, their faces softening as they realized, oh, we really screwed up. No wonder you're struggling. We're so sorry. It was embarrassingly cinematic. The actual letter was about 2 pages. Calm, clinical, careful. It used phrases like adverse childhood experiences, hypervigilance, somatic symptoms consistent with chronic stress. It did not say, your parents are monsters. It said, your client shows signs of having grown up in an environment where physical punishment and emotional invalidation were common. I read it in my apartment and cried until my cat climbed onto my chest and patted my face like, this seems serious, please stop leaking. Then, because some stubborn part of me still believed my parents could meet me halfway, I called Mom and asked if I could come over to talk. Of course, she said too brightly. Your father will be happy. He says he never sees you anymore. I thought about all the times I'd tried to visit and been met with criticism before I even took off my shoes. You look tired, you've gained weight, you don't call enough. I pushed the thought away. Just you, if that's okay, I said. I wanted to talk without extra voices. She was quiet for a beat. Is this about money? She asked. It wasn't, but that told me a lot. When I arrived that Sunday, the house smelled like lemon cleaning spray and whatever potpourri she'd recently decided was classy. The curtains were half closed like the house was squinting. She'd laid out biscuits like it was a job interview. Dad was out with a friend, which probably meant complaining about me at the pub. We did the small talk dance first. Work, weather, my brother's job, a neighbor's new fence. The air felt thick, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Finally, I took a breath and nudged the folder toward her. I asked my therapist to write something, I said. About my childhood. About how some things affected me. I was hoping we could talk about it. Her face tightened at the word. Therapist. You paid her to write this? She asked, already suspicious. It's part of my treatment, I said, immediately defensive. She didn't write anything I didn't tell her. She sighed, but opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the page, lips moving slightly as she read. I watched her face like it was a weather report. She paused at corporal punishment, flinched at emotional invalidation, frowned deeply at symptoms consistent with complex trauma. Then she put the pages down very carefully, like they might explode, and wrapped her hands around her mug as if to anchor herself. We didn't know better then, she said. And that's where you found us. She said it like an incantation. Like if she repeated it enough, it would erase the words on the page. as if ignorance was a force field that magically protected her from any responsibility for the damage. I know you didn't know better, I said again, trying to keep my voice from sharpening. I know Grandma and Grandpa hit you worse. I know school was rough. I know no one was talking about mental health. I'm not saying you woke up every day and thought, how can I screw up my kids? I'm saying, regardless of your intent, I ended up with panic attacks and a body that flinches when someone raises their hand too fast. Tears sprang to her eyes. So this is my fault, she said. Everything that's wrong with you is my fault. There it was. The all or nothing. I rubbed my thumb against a nick in the tabletop. I didn't say fault, I said. I said impact. Maya, my therapist, keeps telling me I can hold two things at once, that you loved us, and that you hurt us. Both can be true. She shook her head. You're using her words now, she said. You sound like a book. We did our best. We didn't know. Everyone did it. Not everyone, I said quietly. Not my friends' parents. When I tell them stories, they look horrified. They're soft, she snapped. You all are. No wonder everyone's depressed. Too much talking about feelings. I thought about the shower. I hadn't intended to, but the memory slipped in like a draft. I was 10. I'd forgotten to take out the trash, again. My brain had been busy with a book, with drawing, with anything but the list of chores stuck to the fridge. Dad came home, saw the full bin, and lost it. What did we say? He roared, grabbing the front of my shirt. One thing. We asked you to do one thing? I started to cry before I could stop myself. That set him off more. The tears, he spat. Always the tears. You think crying makes you less wrong? He dragged me down the hall to the bathroom. You like to act like a baby? He said. Fine. Babies take baths. He shoved me into the tub, clothes and all, and turned the water on cold. I yelped, the chill shocking my lungs. He held the shower head over me, water pounding my shoulders, my back, my face. The pressure made my already tender skin burn. Maybe this will wash the laziness off, he said. I remember looking at the tiles and thinking, if I stare at this one spot, I won't cry. If I don't cry, maybe he'll stop. He didn't. My tears mixed with the water and went down the drain. Mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You brought this on yourself, she said when he finally turned off the water and left, muttering. If you just did what you were told. She handed me a towel, not making eye contact. I dried myself off in front of her like a puppy being scolded, my clothes heavy and dripping in a puddle at my feet. Later, when I mentioned that scene in therapy, Maya went very still. That sounds humiliating and terrifying, she said. That is not a normal or healthy consequence for a child forgetting a chore. When I tentatively brought it up with Mom years later. Do you remember that time Dad put me in the shower with my clothes on? She said. Oh, that. You were being impossible. He overreacted, sure, but it's not like he drowned you. The bar was always subterranean in our house. Sitting at the table with the letter between us, I realized I'd been trying, in some twisted way, to give her a softer bar to reach for. You didn't know, was the closest she'd come to admitting anything. But the longer she said it, the more it grated. You know better now, I said finally. She looked up sharply. What? You didn't know then. Fine. But you know now. Kids getting hit like that? It messes them up. There are studies, and books, and campaigns. Doctors tell you not to. Schools tell you not to. I'm sitting here, a grown adult, telling you this hurt me. You can't keep using we didn't know when I'm literally showing you the effects. Her eyes flashed. So what do you want from me? She demanded. You want me to say I was a terrible mother? Will that make you happy? Will that magically heal all your trauma? My chest tightened. I want you to say I'm sorry, I said. Just once. Without defending it. Without saying you had it worse. Without telling me I'm exaggerating. She scoffed. You are exaggerating, she said. The way you talk, you'd think we beat you every day. It wasn't that bad. You turned out fine. I laughed then, a short, disbelieving sound that tasted like salt. You call this fine? I asked, gesturing to myself. The panic attacks? The nightmares? The way I can't trust anyone to raise their voice without wanting to hide in a bathroom? The fact that I can't even bring this up without my whole body shaking? This is not fine. Her face crumpled. For a second, I thought she might actually cry for herself instead of for the image she wanted to keep. We loved you, she whispered. I swallowed, feeling the familiar pull. Comfort her, tell her she did okay, make it easier. It's a reflex so deeply ingrained my muscles twitch with it. I know you did, I said, and the words hurt in a different way. That's what's so confusing. You loved me. And you hurt me. Those both happened. I'm trying to heal from the hurt. And it feels like every time I tried to say, this part damaged me, you never loved me, and shut down. She pressed her lips together so tightly they went white. I just wish you'd focus on the good, she said. The holidays. The birthday parties. The times we laughed. Why dig up all the painful things? Because my body never buried them, I said, louder than I intended. They're right here. I touched my forearm, my shoulder, my chest. In how I flinch. How I freeze. How I can't relax in this house. You got to move on and call it not knowing. I'm the one still waking up at 3 a.m. Because I dreamed Dad was standing in my doorway with his belt. You want me to focus on the good? I'd love to. I need you to admit there was also bad so my brain can stop gaslighting itself. The word gaslighting made her flinch more than any mention of hitting ever did. We never lied to you, she said sharply. We never did that psychology stuff. You're doing it right now, I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Saying it wasn't that bad when my therapist, who does this for a living, literally wrote the word significant adverse impact about it. She looked at the folder like it was something rotten. She only hears your side. She snapped. Of course she'll coddle you. There it was. The core belief, any kindness is coddling, any accountability is attack. Something in me went very still. I think I need to go, I said. Her head jerked up. You're leaving? Just like that? Just like that, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Before I say something we can't come back from. What about your father? She said. He'll want to talk. He's had 30 years to talk, I said. And every time he opens his mouth, it's to tell me I deserved it. I'm done having that conversation. She stared at me with something like betrayal in her eyes. So that's it, she whispered. You cut us off? I didn't say that, I said. I'm saying I need space. I can't keep coming here and being told I'm dramatic for bleeding. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady. The kitchen looked exactly the same as it always had, the fridge with too many magnets, the faded calendar with a generic landscape, the dish rack with a single plate drying. It was surreal, how the room could hold both the memory of a kid wiping up their own blood and the image of a grown woman holding a therapist's letter. At the door, she called after me. We didn't know better, she said again, almost pleading. I paused, hand on the knob. I believe you, I said, turning halfway back. I do. You didn't know better then. But you do now. What you do with that, that's on you. What I do with what you didn't know, that's on me. And I'm choosing not to keep paying for it with my skin. Her mouth opened, closed. She didn't follow me to the driveway. In the car, my hands shook so badly I had to sit for a while before I could trust myself to drive. Tears came in that messy, snotty way that makes you glad for tinted windows. My brain did its usual double act. One voice saying, "You're cruel, you're ungrateful, you just hurt your mother," the other saying, "You finally told the truth. You finally didn't swallow it." I texted Maya, had the conversation. It went, as expected. Can we move my next session sooner? She replied with a simple, absolutely. Proud of you for taking care of yourself. There's that word again. Proud. I still flinch a little when someone says it about me in a non-sarcastic way. It's been 6 months since that Sunday. My relationship with my parents is thin. We text occasionally. Mom sends me chain messages about angels and luck. I send her photos of the cat. We orbit each other cautiously, like planets that used to share a sun and now pretend they don't miss the warmth even as they enjoy not being burned. Dad mostly pretends the conversation never happened. The couple of times we've spoken on the phone, he's slipped in lines like, "Kids these days blame their parents for everything," and, "Your mother and I did our best, you'll see when you have your own." I'm not sure I will. Kids, I mean. Not because I think I'd be a bad parent, I actually think I'd be annoyingly careful, but because the idea of holding that tiny, trusting body and feeling my father's hand in the back of my mind makes me want to run. Maya and I are unpacking that slowly, like a box marked, fragile, you're not sure you want to open. What's shifted most, weirdly, isn't them. It's me. Before, every time they said, "We didn't know better," I heard, "Therefore you have no right to feel hurt." It cancelled my pain. Made me feel guilty for being the one still bleeding from an accident they insisted was no big deal. Now, I hear it as information, not absolution. They didn't know better. That explains why they did what they did. It does not change what they did. It doesn't magically remove the bruises or the anxiety, or the way my shoulders tense when someone moves too fast. Not knowing better might soften the edges of their intent, but it doesn't erase the impact. I'm allowed to feel angry about being hit, even if their parents hit them worse. I'm allowed to grieve the comfort I didn't get, even if they provided food and shelter. I'm allowed to draw a line now, as an adult, and say, "We can keep talking, but not if you keep pretending my scars are made up." Sometimes that line means I don't go over when Dad's been drinking. Sometimes it means I end a phone call when Mom starts with, "You always," and doesn't stop. Sometimes it means I say, "I'm not going to discuss that," and sit with how wrong that feels in my bones. The other day, my brother called me. We don't talk about the heavy stuff much. His survival strategy was always to blend in, crack jokes, stay under the radar. But he sounded thoughtful. "Mom told me you two had a big talk," he said. I winced. "Yeah. I guess." He was quiet for a moment. "She said you're still hung up on the past," he said. "That you think she abused you." I waited for the familiar shame. It didn't hit as hard. "I said some of what happened was abusive," I corrected. "That's accurate." He blew out a breath. "I mean, it was rough sometimes," he said. "But they didn't know better then." There it was. I almost laughed. "I know," I said. "Do you know better now?" He hesitated. "I guess? Then if you ever have kids, maybe don't do what they did," I said. "That's the whole point of knowing better." He was quiet for a long time. "Do you think they did their best?" he asked finally. I thought about Mom's hands shaking slightly around her mug. About Dad's face when he realized he'd left a bruise that lasted a week. About the way they never apologized, only justified. "I think they did the best they knew how to do," I said. "I also think their best hurt us. Those two things can both be true." He hummed. "That sucks," he said. "Yeah," I said. "It really does." We changed the subject after that. Talked about his job, my cat, a show we both like. But something felt different. Like a door had cracked open, just a little, in his mind. I don't know if my parents will ever walk through theirs. Maybe. "We didn't know better" is the farthest they'll ever get toward owning anything. Maybe they'll go to their graves believing they were long-suffering saints, and I was a difficult child who read too many psychology books. I can't control that. What I can control is what I do with the knowledge I have now. That hitting kids leaves marks that last decades. That words spoken in anger grow roots. That silence can be as loud as shouting. And that, not knowing better, is not a spell that erases harm. It's a starting point. I used to hear my mother's line and feel instantly guilty, like I was accusing her of a crime she didn't mean to commit. Now, when she says, "We didn't know better then," I still feel a pang, but underneath it, there's this quieter voice that says, "Okay. And now we do. So I'm going to act like it. I won't be the one hitting a kid and calling it love. I won't be the one telling them they're dramatic for bleeding. I won't be the one who hears, 'You hurt me,' and replies, 'That's not possible, because I didn't mean to.' If there's one good thing to come out of all this mess, it's that I'm the edge of the map where 'we didn't know better' finally meets 'we sure as hell do now.' And I'm sorry, truly, honestly, that it took my skin to draw that line.